Alright everyone, so today I'm going to be reading you all with another Metalhead manga review. This next one is going to be the third book in the books that I didn't really watch compilation, which is Finn Family Moomintroll, as I have displayed right here. The second volume of the Finn Family storybook starts off with a cold snow of winter melting and the regular life returning to the Moomin Valley. Stuck and returning from his adventures, the Moomin family wake for the winter hibernation. Metalhead works on collecting mushrooms and other plants. We are introduced to the characters in the book at the very start. Mostly just Moomin Mama at the center of the family, highly moral but broad-minded. We have Papa, a storyteller and a dreamer, and very loyal to his family and friends. Moomintroll is gullible as he is enthusiastic. He is also naive and extremely good-natured. As Nork made it, Moomintroll is lady friend and very occupied with romantic fantasies. Snufkin, a vagabond musician and Moomintroll's best friend. Steve, an adopted friend of the family, his main interest is acquiring riches such as gemstones. The Growth, the terror of everyone and unspeakable horror. The Muskrat would be a philosopher, lights three left in peace. Thingamy involved a mischievous pair, too fond of pea shooters and such. Amulan, fantastic collector of stamps and plants. Tukiki, her common sense often restored order to the valley. Little Me, the family's small, disrespectful, yet extremely positive friend. In which case, we're also greeted with the map of Moomin Valley. So there's the lilac, there's the woodshed, there's the jasmine, there's the tobacco, there's the Moomin house, which has the veranda, drawing room, Muskrat's room, Thinking Mob's room, bathroom, kitchen, with the stove, the Himmel's room, Moomin Mama's room, Moomin Papa's room, room for everything. There's the landing, another landing, and then Sniff's room, spare room, Snork's room, and Snufkin and Moomintroll's room. We're also greeted to the cave, the lonely mountain, the sandbank, as well as everything else that is within the valley. And then on the distance, we have the Happy Father's Island. Some points to remember with the storybooks is that the plot has tons of off-canon ideas that are actually cut from the anime. So the movie 1970s anime is actually based off of these novels, but a lot of stuff that from the novel actually gets cut in the anime for continuity and pacing's sake, which I'm kind of glad that they did that, because the anime, I feel like, tells the story just a lot better in a lot more cohesive way. And apparently the Moomin Valley is connected to Earth somehow, because Moomin, when transformed by the Hobgoblin's hat, which happens at some point in this chapter, if I were to actually fast forward until when they find the hat, and they proceed to find the guy, I believe, stuck inside the hat. And then if I were oh yes, it happens in chapter 2, in which Moomintroll suffers an uncomfortable change and takes its revenge on the Antlion. In which case, the Antlions are an actual real-life insect. They can be found in a lot of places in the Middle East and in Africa. They're kind of common in desert areas. And then but this is a different creature that actually happens in the Moomin franchise that actually looks completely different from its real-life counterpart. Moomintroll is looking to go on a secret night expedition. One warm summer day, it was raining softly in the valley of the Moomins, so they all decided to play hide and seek indoors. Steve stood in the corner with his nose in his pocket and his head before he turned around and began hunting. The first and ordinary hiding places, and then the extraordinary ones. Moomintroll landed on a veranda at the table, feeling rather worried. It wasn't a good place, and if one of you sure to look at the tablecloth, he would be stuck. When he looked about and caught sight of the tall black hat which stood in the corner, that looked like a brilliant idea. Sniff would never think to be looking under that. Moomintroll stole quietly into the corner and pulled the hat over his head. It didn't reach further than his middle. But if he made himself very small and tucked his tail, he would be quite invisible. He could hold it to himself when he heard others being found one after another. And obviously hidden himself under the sofa again. He could never find a better hiding place. And now they're all running around searching for Moomintroll. He waited until he was afraid that they would get bored with the search and then crept out of the hat, stuck his head through the castle and said, "Look at me." Sniff stared at him for a long time and then he said rather unkindly, "Look at yourself." Who's that? Whispered the Snork, and the others who shook their heads and continued to stare at Moomintroll. Poor little chap, he had been turned into a very strange animal indeed under the hobgoblin's hat. All his fat parts had become thin, everything that was small had grown big, and the strange thing about himself was that he didn't realize what was the matter. I thought it'd surprise you all, taking an uncertain step forward on his long spindly legs. You have no idea where I've been. It doesn't interest us, said the Snork, but you are certainly not enough to surprise anybody. You are unkind, said Moomintroll sadly, I suppose. You are tired of hunting. What shall we do now? First of all, perhaps you should introduce yourself, said the Snork man stiffly. We don't know who you are, do we? Moomintroll looked rather incredulously. Then it dawned on him that perhaps this was a new game. He laughed violently and said, "I'm the King of California," which brings me to my point that apparently, when transformed into the Hobgoblin's hat, he was announcing himself as the King of California, and mentioned how a boat should be. I brought up something that was going to happen in a later chapter, but apparently a lot of things that are just kind of existing and that we're familiar with apparently get imprinted into the book as well. How this affects the world building, I have no clue. And someone in the chapter, when they actually sail to the Fattener's Island, they mentioned how a boat should be christened in order for it to sail properly, which means that Nazareth and other biblical locations exist in these books. Again, how this affects the world building in Moon Valley is up for a complete guess. And also, first two chapters of the book are all about the Moomin Valley preparing for the spring. Sniff gestures at the family while they make breakfast. Snufkin and Moomin do a lot more with the hat than in just the enemies to just turn different things into other things, like turning eggshells into clouds, even putting inside the muskrat's cave before getting back to the Hobgoblin, who totally does not look like Sir Christopher Lee if you've ever seen the anime. When they return Moomin to normal, and then actually I should probably even find a potential, like, I don't know if they've ever actually drawn what the Hobgoblin looks like. But they actually draw in this version. I mean, anyway, he looks a lot different, but this is what he looks like. And tell me he does not look like Sir Christopher Lee, because he does. And then when they return Moomin to normal, they realize that the plants have been turned into vines, which take over the house, because at some point something gets dropped into the hat and it turns into a bunch of vines that they have to clear out. Which is what Moomintroll does with his axe, and then they christen the Adventure, which is the most basic of all names. When Snufkin suggested Lark and Wolf, which was another option for naming the boat, I would have gone with that one. Apparently, Snufkin's just better than everyone at naming things, I guess. They set off to the island of Hattifatnutters, which are these little creatures that are blind, deaf, and mute, but are very sensitive to feel. So in the desert, and to escape from these creatures, Mr. Hangling gets on a signal tower and shakes it aggressively to escape. They're tackling him. After they have a banquet on the island and explore its numerous facets before returning to Moomin Cap, the others that explore the new island saw a dreadful wild cliff that goes right down to the sea. Hangling declares the barometer is a war trophy and is held in the middle of the tablecloth. Emily Papa explains that while sometimes they are quite right, the barometer points to the lowest, and a barometer can point to it if it isn't fooling us, then it indicates how it is apparently stormy. When Papa's Nistier determines that it is a thunderstorm and decides that we stay for the whole night, and the adventure was dragged high up onto the sand on the edge of the wood. They quickly made a house with a sail and some blankets, kind of turning it into a makeshift tent. Always fills up the gaps with moss, and the Snork dug a ditch to go around it so that the rainwater would have somewhere to go. Everybody ran to and fro, putting their things safely under cover, while the thunder rolled nearer and a little wind came sighing anxiously through the trees. Nufkin goes to see what the weather is like out on the point, and pulling his hat firmly over his ears, set off alone and happy he ran out to the farthermost point of the rock and put his back against a large boulder. After confirming that it was indeed still stormy, he was met with a mixture of joy and excitement. He ran back to the inside of Moon Valley with the Hemulans' botanical scents filling the room. The Moomins are all terrified, Moomin and Snort Maiden especially. The storm began to move off to the south. The thunderclaps got farther and farther away. The lightning became fainter, and at last there was only rustle of the rain and the sound of the sea as it broke down on the shore. They agreed that they would explore everything, and the storm doubled its fury. The voice of the waves was now mixed with strange sounds, laughter, running feet, and the clanging of great bells far out to sea, in which, owing to the Hattiefattener's night attack, the Snork Maiden loses her hair, in which the most remarkable discovery is made on the lonely island. In the middle of the night, the Snork Maiden woke up with an awful feeling. Something touched her face. She didn't dare to look, but sniffed uneasily around her. They confused the electric Hattiefatteners for ghosts. One of the Hattiefatteners trod on Mr. Hill's nose. In a moment, everyone was awake and on their feet. Pandemonium broke loose. Sniff got an electric shock, and the Hattiefatteners were trodden on. The Hemulan rushed out, screaming with terror, and entangled themselves in the sails, so the whole tent collapsed on top of them. Moomintroll shivered and clutched her handbag tight as she looked out over the stormy night sea. She'll build a new house and try to sleep again. That wouldn't be of any use, and Moomintroll will wrap ourselves up in the blankets and wait till the sun gets up. The night was nearly over now, and the storm was far away, but the breakers still thundered in over the sand. The Snork Maiden complains that her hair is burned off by the Hattiefattener's electricity, but is comforted by the promise of how Moomintroll will help with hair growth. This is something that actually can be done in real life. They went outside the tent, and Moomintroll prepared lunch while Moomintroll explored with friends, and Moomintroll lies down in a sheltered spot from which she could only see the blue sky and the sea pinks that waved over her head. Snork poked about with his penknife at an entire crag in the side of a mountain which was struck by lightning during a thunderstorm which was filled with gold. He was not just a beachcomber, but a gold digger. Sniff had found himself a lifebelt, which was slightly rotted by seawater, but it fitted him perfectly. "It's quite nice," said Sniff critically, with his head on the sidewalk. "What do you think of this?" And he displayed his find on the sand. "Never in your life," said Moomintroll, "but perhaps the lifebelts for this rare object must have drifted here from a distant land." Moomintroll acquired a snow blow. They were a brief standoff with the rogue, in which they traded Jewel for the rogue, leaving them alone. Chapter 7 is very long and describes Snufkin's departure and how the contents of the mysterious suitcase were revealed, and how Moomintroll found her handbag and arranged a party to celebrate it, and finally with how the Hobgoblin arrived in the Valley of the Moomins. The ending shows the Moomins celebrating the coming of fall, for it means spring will come again soon. And I left out a lot of details from this book because obviously I wanted to avoid major plot spoilers, but I kind of summarized a bunch of the bits from every different chapter. But I actually recommend anyone check out this book. I don't necessarily want it, but I do think if you're into Moomin, it's definitely worth a read. I'll mostly just stick to watching the anime because I think that the way anime sets up the storytelling and the world building is a little more cohesive and concise. And I think that the voice acting in both Japanese and Finnish is really good, and I like the visual design of the characters as well as the music, of which I would highly recommend anyone check out. This is just the Nordic Shredder signing off. Hope you all have a great day.